that is the difference. And that's why when I always look at it, we see the disciples are usually in a state of panic and intense fear, and usually we're reading, saying, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? And Christ is asleep the first time, very calm, and they're in panic. And you would think they would learn after the first time, but we see them, it's repeated. And so that's why we see the same thing happens in our life. We could have a challenge, and in the beginning we react and overreact, and then the problem passes, we resume, we become normal again until the next storm. And so I just want to go through different types of fears and see how we can face the challenges and help others with challenges. These are just some categories that I tried my best to summarize in at least 7 different. These are not an exhaustive list. You can go home and try to create more and imagine more or prioritize the ones that you have. This is something, a new phrase, I think that's in the business world and also in the computer industry as well, which the founder of Amazon also found that this is in the executives at Amazon and some of the biggest companies have this. Now with all the metadata and all the information that we have access at our fingertips, there is a paralysis that happens hindering our ability to analyze all this information that is coming to us. When they first Google and when the internet was first new, there was a professor at UCLA who studied the effects of the brain as someone is interacting with the internet and just Google searches and researching a subject, and compared that with someone reading a book. Did I ever tell you about this? When it was new, every talk I would give would be so they show these brain, and they found out something interesting. They said when we are reading a book, it usually focuses a certain part of your mind, which is for analytical skills. And the more that someone reads and you exercise this muscle in your brain, the better you are at analyzing. And so that's why executives they're paid to analyze data and to come up with certain conclusions. But the difference in thought process when you are on Google is that it occupies or it activates different parts of your different senses, different thought pattern, which is not wrong. But when it comes to analytical skills, they're a little bit weaker. And that's why not so good news. So those who grew up without the internet, like and reading, we had to read. It didn't exist, right? So the analytical skills are pretty good. But if you didn't read a book, like as a book, and very fewer book, which is what's happening now, fewer and fewer, so the analytical skills are a little bit less. And so that's why you can know how to deal with and access a lot of different information points at the same time. You can have an awareness, a larger awareness of many things. But when it comes to analysis, it may be, not necessarily, but may be hindered. And so that's what's happening in a lot of the industries that we see. To make proper decisions or best decisions, many people struggle more to reach that. So that's especially when you're not sure of the future, right? So there can be a paralysis, so we don't know what to do. There's just different ways that they read the full article below, but I don't have it here. But how to make smaller decisions, right? There's a practice, daily practice that we have in our life, how to discuss decisions before, during, and after. So there's a process of coming up with proper decisions or identifying the goals and having them clear and to sometimes even avoid perfectionism, or to take a break when you feel overwhelmed with all the information. Because especially like when you're dealing with data and metadata, it's all over the place. I remember they used to teach us how to do surveys and access data from the Gallup polls. So remember, first time going into it, you find all of this information, and you don't know where to ask. But you can ask any question, and using the Gallup polls for how many decades, you can get pretty good information. But if you don't know which question you want to ask, all that information is kind of useless. So if you're overwhelmed, you can't. So it's better they teach you how to go step by step. And I think this was many years ago. Right now, it's even more difficult how to deal with all the information. There's also unexpected events which happen in our lives. I think this is what the storm is, because nobody knows how to deal with the storm, right? Maybe expert sailors, they have experience. But if you were a regular, like St. Matthew was not in the sea every day. He was in the stock market, he was in business. It wasn't his field. And even St. Peter, like the expert fisherman who was in the sea every day, still is. You can see him at his most difficult time, even though he lives in the sea. So fear of the unknown also puts this for many people to have this type of paralysis, or what they call false evidence appearing real. Sometimes we have an imagined fear that's not even able to identify or to speak about it. You know yourself or other people when we have this imagined fear, that when someone asks you what's wrong, you can't even really say exactly. You just kind of say everything that's going on. And the person in front of you is a little bit confused. What is the problem? What actually is going to happen? Well, I'm not sure. For example, when you start driving and your parents will wait at home, in this type of fear of the unknown, right? And if you come a little bit late or don't text or call at the time that you are, so then it's assumptions and the imagination kind of goes wild. So this unpredictability and insecurity is something that we fight against, and that's why the Proverbs is very helpful. We say we trust in the Lord with all our heart, and lean not on our understanding, but in all our ways we acknowledge Him, and He will direct our paths. So we do our best with what we have day by day, and we're not planning like God is planning. We're, as I say, we plan for the best, we hope we plan for the worst, we hope for the best. Don't do the opposite. So that's why we do what we can with what we have. One of the major fears, which is the financial fears, especially in an unpredictable markets that we have today, an unpredictable world. And in America, at least, these are usually the top of all fears of most people. This was an article a few years ago in Forbes magazine. But how to pay mortgage, loan payments, interest rates, the value of your home increasing or decreasing unpredictably, not having work, many things. So this was their percentages that most Americans have, but it's pretty high when you look at it. Like some of the things I never don't think about that often, but maybe that's just my mistake. And also in terms of projects, you know what I found? Also, one of the highest stresses for people when they are doing construction in their home. You've heard of this type of? I think it's something relatively new, but when you deal with contractors, because you don't know, and your life is put on hold, and especially if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, it can not just affect your finance, but it affects your daily life. Because the unpredictability, as well as the financial stresses, people act differently. And St. Paul gives us, for many of these, guidance. He said, I have all and abound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you. He's talking to the city of Philippi, which is one of his most beloved, and they supported him even when other cities wouldn't. So that's why he said, I learned how to be content, whatever the fact, and he definitely was above this view. So the thing sent from you, a sweet smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God, and my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. Now to our God. It's at the end of the book. But when you look at him, like especially in Philippi, he said, because you were faithful to me when I was in need, I can guarantee, he said, I know God will supply your lack and your need. So because he said, I taught myself, I trained myself how to be content whether I have or I don't have. Like in the church when we kiss both sides. So if we receive whatever we have received, and what we have not received, we're also thankful for. So that's the concept. It's not in a lot of Orthodox churches. It's very Egyptian. And it has a very powerful meaning. Or St. Augustine, when he said this, is after his conversion, so he was about 41 when he said this, he said that I felt like I was on top of the world because I desired nothing and I feared nothing. It's a very powerful statement. There's nothing in life that I need. It's not like he's the wealthiest man. He was wealthy, but not like many other people at that time. He said there's nothing that I really want to possess. I have everything. And then he said, I'm afraid of nothing and no one. Because I said, I have my God. And so he said, that way, those two things give me this feeling, this position above every thing. I remember once when I was in graduate school, there was like fraud on one of my cards, so I called the bank. It's many years ago, so more primitive than it is now. So they said, okay, don't use your card. We have to freeze everything for a couple of days. I was in Indiana at the time. And the bank was in Chicago. So I could only go, I had like 5 days before I could go to Chicago. So I said, okay, there's no money. And at the time, I maybe had $20. But it was a good experience. At the time, there was like a economic recession, struggle. There were a lot of people struggling at the time. I was a priest who was struggled, blessed, so we should be struggling like everyone else. So I remember, I said, well, what do I do? I don't have any money. Go to the kitchen. There's not really much. There's not much stored in there. So I said, okay, how can I live 5 days on whatever I have? And then even think, well, how do I even get gas? I don't have enough gas to. So I started to think all these things. I said, this is a daily practice. It's because we rely on credit, on family, we don't think of the daily struggles, which in the early church, and most humans, most people, had this concern. So they had a daily trust that God will provide with everything. That's why the Lord says, look at the birds. Do they hunger and do they worry? Is there an anxiety bird that goes to the other birds? What are we going to eat today? what if there's no food? What if it rains? But the birds don't. So he says, I take care of them. And we don't think about it. Like, if the birds, you have nice birds. If the birds didn't eat one day, we won't know, even though they're, But God, he says, I take care of them, and I will take care of you much more than that they. And I clothe the grass. It's my world. You're part of my creation. So sometimes because we depend on the credit card and our income, and the bank, and our friends, and our job, we put our security in that. But the Lord says, do not put your trust in princes. Will always disappoint. And sometimes, unintentionally, we do that. Right? We trust on our friends, and trust on people who are experts in the field. But it's a good reminder for us. Other thing, we have sometimes fear of authority and judgment. Sometimes our boss, sometimes our parents, sometimes very difficult professors or our advisors. And this limits our potential, makes us sometimes too nervous, even to deal with others, right? There's some people that are in a panic before they reach work or home because they're not sure how they're going to deal, especially if you're dealing with a narcissistic personality. takes a lot. Hopefully, you don't even know that is. But sometimes, if you are, especially people who are who ridicule, who control, who use different types of pressure, it's very hard to deal. So how do we not have an fear of that type of authority, and are really above, like St. Augustine said, I don't fear anyone. And he could also respond, FOMO, this is something, more for the younger, I think. I don't know. You didn't grow up with social media, did you? Kinda? Junior high? It was new? You didn't say junior social media, what is that? How old is Instagram? 2012. Okay. Oh, you were one of, okay, I didn't know. By the time I discovered it, it was gone. It turned into something else, Facebook. Yeah. So it seems like there is an anxiety, and I think the younger that you are, the more prevalent it is. Like I said, we pass through other things. Like if you avoided certain groups, you were like safe, because the pressure is with certain people. But online, it's very difficult to see, and it actually starts to. The problem, as you know, with social media, is that people draw conclusions about themselves, about their status, about their success, based on what they don't have control of, and it's something that they can count on any time of day, and it can go up or down, or whatever the lights, whatever it is. And so recent studies, it's not as recent, they link the feelings of disconnection and dissatisfaction fueled by the social media. You were right, the FOMO, I think the term was first put into the Oxford Dictionary in 2013. So social media started in 2012, it sounds right. So not that long, it's barely a decade. But the less people felt autonomous or competent or connected in their daily lives, the more that they felt this fear of missing out. And it's not even what are you missing out on, right? So then they go to see all the events, say, oh, well, how come I wasn't there? And even there could have not been that good, because it's social, how they do the thing. It could have been a very bland, normal event, but if it looks good online, then I feel like, yeah, I've lost something. Even though my day or that night could have been very good. So that's the trap. Like I said, I know that you understand this probably better than I. But it's a facade. Here we go to we still have Universal Studios still there. So you know the facade. Did you ever see the facade? So it'd be like looks like a building, and then they drive around. There's no building. It is an illusion. And that's what this is all about. That's what social media is. The illusion of people. Even some people are very good on social media, and they are influencers. Some of them, there's nothing really behind. So there is an insecurity within for many of them. Some of them discount it because there's an image, but the reality there's nothing true or substantial, I would say, behind it. So no matter how good the facade is, it's not a building. You can't live in it. You can't live behind the building. You can influence people, and you can have a good image, but that's not life. Fear of social rejection. They've discovered that the brain responds to social rejection in the same way that it does with physical pain, which is hard to, even for all levels of different positions, like in the world. So whether it's in politics, whether it's in business, whether it's even in the church, sometimes we're affected by the way people react to us, or what's called nitpickers, people who always you might work or have professors like this. You'll do a very good job, but then they'll find the one thing, and it's not even that important. If you can't answer, or if it's not good enough, it's very minutia. And it can affect us, right? Those type of nitpickers. When Nehemiah came to build the wall, he had Sanballat and the others attacking him for nothing, and because they're doing good, not because the work is not good. Because they're doing good, then they face this type of criticism, and sometimes we are surrounded by that type of environment, which can make it difficult to work. That's the whole point. Who sent Sanballat? Who sent these people? Did God say they need a few nitpickers? Yeah, the devil is the one. He said, they look like they're doing very good work. Let's send some of these people to decrease the... yes. it's the evil. It's evil. Or like what Goliath used to do every day. When he'd wake up in the morning, what was he doing? This is the art of, Yes, terrorize. How? Yeah, and mocking, and jeering, and yelling. I mean, this is his technique, right? So sometimes we have that environment too. Was David like shook? He went to the town when he came, and he found them in terror, right? All the Israelites. He got very upset. He's a kid. So he said, "What are you doing? Any one of you can defeat Goliath." Did they believe him? They're like, "No, you do it then." He said, "Okay." It's not a problem for me. So the rejection or the intimidation that David was saying, he said, "I don't fear man. I fear God." So if God is with me, then there's very simple equation for David. How did David rationalize it when they were asking him? Sure, we don't think that you can do this. So you know what justification he gave? He said, "No, I have proof." Yeah, the lion and the bear. He said, "I've already fought enemies. They look a little different than Goliath, but they're all the same." And he said, "Because it's not me. The principle is very clear. God is working through me. So whatever the enemy, it doesn't matter if he's 10 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet, this 200 pounds, 500 pounds, it doesn't matter." But the principle was there, and so that's why if you look at David's life, he went through different enemies. So he started with the lion and the bear, and then he went to Goliath. Then he had enemies that he was fighting on behalf of Israel, like that are surrounding. And then he became, when they rejected him, he was actually part of the enemies of Israel, so he had to fight Israel, which is like unheard of. How do you fight your own people? And he knows he's the king. How do you do that? Until finally they recognized him. He had to fight against Saul, who was also king. So how do you fight against the anointed? No, he's trying to kill me, and I have Saul, like I can kill him. He's like, no, I can't touch the Lord's anointed. So what are you going to do? So he's there. They said, you have the opportunity to kill him. Kill him. He said, no, I won't. So, okay, then leave. He said, no, but I have to make a point. Why? So he can at least stop. That's the only way to stop is to convince him that I respect you and I won't take my hand against you because you are the anointed. But he also was telling him indirectly, but so am I. You need to leave me alone. And for a while, he left him alone. That was the way he defeated Saul. But then later, he got to the hardest enemy of all. First, then he had within his own family, his sons and daughters fighting with each other. Very difficult. And then he had his son fighting against him. That was the biggest challenge for David. Your son is causing rebellion against you. And you as the king have to defend your city, your people. How? And he instructed nobody to kill Absalom. Nobody's allowed. So they looked at him and said, how are we supposed to defeat this challenge? How are you going to be king? And what's going to happen to your kingdom? So anyhow, God worked for it. But what I want to say is that the challenges and the enemies grew with time, but David knew how to overcome them. So St. Paul says the same thing. We're troubled on every side. Outside were conflicts, and inside were fears. There's a fear of failure, which some people have. A couple weeks ago, I was at one of the campuses, which I will not say, USC. But nobody wanted to ask questions, so I kept probing them and said, well, how do you not ask questions on campus? Like, what do you do in your classes? They said, we don't ask questions. So then they said, well, then the professors answer, because what I ended up doing was answering my own questions, which I don't like doing. As a lawyer, you don't do that. You put apply pressure until they answer the question. Even if they have to squirm a little bit, it's okay. But they're responding, no, now most of the time we don't ask questions. So I was asking why. Do you know why? Because if this is true, then we're in trouble. They don't want to ask questions. They don't want to answer questions. Is that true? And then sometimes at the end of the lecture, someone will come up or the talk and ask a question. Someone will get a line. She said, well, we had time. I know you have time to question and answer, so I think you will have. Yes? But do you know what they answered me? Because I hope it's not that accurate, but at least for some people it is. Public speaking, it's more a fear of embarrassment, intimidation, shame if I don't answer the right way or if I don't ask the right question. I said, how can you ask a wrong, like, I said, when we were in law school, you'd be on call. Have you heard of this? I don't even know if they do that anymore. So you would read 100 pages at night, typical, and then the professor would come in and just randomly go through the list and call on a name. And then you'd be grilled for 5 to 10 minutes and graded on that section. So if you didn't read that section, or even you read it, like I always read it, that's a good question. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And if they ask me, I would not know. So every day you're under this type of pressure because they want to train you. You have to be, as a lawyer, you have to be trained in this way so you can respond. And sometimes, on purpose, the professor would ridicule, I remember there was an older professor, and mock the student, even if they got it right, to see how you are under pressure. This is what we had to deal with 2 years ago. Now I'm sure there'd be a lot of lawsuits if you just look or just insinuate. But that was typical for law students. No, that was how they used to train a law student. And the same thing, I talked to some lawyers, a few, and the judges would treat lawyers that way as well. So you have to be like resilient against that type of attack. Like, it doesn't matter. It's not that it's a game, but that we don't want to be intimidated by that type of treatment. Or failure. Like I said, sometimes we underestimate problems and we're afraid of failure. Or some people, they're so anxious about or worried about failing that they end up failing, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or the fear of success, which it took me a while to understand. Anyone here have fear of success? Do you know who really has fear of success? Usually the most successful people. Why? Because they hold up to high expectations. And sometimes it's difficult to follow through. So if you were very good in business, right, and it's increased, so say it increased 100%, 200%. Right? And the next year it only increased by 50%. It can't be perceived as failure, even though it's extremely successful. So very successful people usually have this, and it's a challenge to even outdo your own success. But if I'm concerned about my image, then it can be a big problem. If I'm concerned primarily about doing the will of God and accomplishing whatever goals that He has put before me, it's not a problem. Right? David did not have fear of success, even though his whole life was filled with successes. In fact, when you look at it, he didn't really, his fear was not delighting the God of love, not doing his will, not fulfilling his commandment. That was the only concern. But because David's heart was so good and so pure, so it wasn't a realized concern. It wasn't only a few times, and we hear about it. There's also what St. Paul refers to as the spirit of fear. And he says that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. Therefore, do not be ashamed of the testimony of the Lord, nor of me, his prisoner, which have shared in the sufferings of the gospel through the power of God. This is much more different than a specialized fear or targeted fear. It's a larger category. Because someone can be afraid, like I said, and there's nothing really clear. They're just living in fear or paralyzed by fear. And we have to always be ready to fight against it. I'll explain a little bit more about the seventh type of fear in a little bit, because it's the hardest one to identify and to defeat. The others probably you don't have or you've seen in the past. But we go through different categories. But if I were to ask you, in general, if you remember, how do we overcome some of these? So fear of the unknown. Just I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next year. So you would say, don't worry. Huh? Leave it on God. Okay, depend on God. Or I'm not sure my financial. Who knows? I could lose everything tomorrow. I put all my money in the stock. Right? Or what some people who monitor the like inflation and all the financial markets. Someone like on a regular basis have to very early in the morning unless you're on Bitcoin, then it's like continuous. Because the stock market used to be, it opens at they ring the bell. Bitcoin they don't. So I don't know. They're always, I don't know how. But again, financial stability. What would you advise? How do you overcome? Exactly. Very good. And missing out, Tomo? That's just a harder one. I don't know what you tell the youth, except like we want to take away social media. And then they have the anxiety for not having their devices. For parents, so the very wise parents, they start very young, limiting, controlling, so that even they don't have access to it for a while. Because the later that you're exposed to social media and in general to devices, the better. Like that's our hope. I think the hope of the older generation, like maybe if we postpone it long enough, they'll turn out like us, or at least a little bit better, a little bit better, right? So that's the hope, right? Because the unknown evil. Yes. What? So I started talking about advertising. Yes, it's manipulating certain fears, so that's why we have to be very careful or cautious how we do it. I was talking to someone. Have you heard of the What Would Jesus Do movement? Did you heard about the book that was based on it? It was actually in the early 1900s. So there was a pastor who came across one of the passages giving the sermon, about the man who left everything. Same story, St. Anthony in the Gospel of Matthew. And so he said, I have, for those who are interested, I have a challenge, and it is a 1-year challenge, and there's only one rule, but it's very important. So whoever interested in taking this challenge, see me after. It's optional. So he had a few people, and he said, okay, the 1-year challenge, there's only one rule, and we will meet every week to evaluate the one rule. So he said, okay, what's the rule? He said, in every decision that you make and every day, we ask God, what would he do in this situation? And whatever it is, you do it. That's the only rule. You have to do it. And if you're struggling with how to accomplish them, then we will discuss that. So you had a group of people, and I haven't read the book in 30 years, so to go back and see but I remember there was a journalist, there was a singer, there was a businessman, a few people, a teacher, I think one of them was a teacher. And so they all have different situations. But I remember the journalist who came and he was saying, would Jesus publish these news, these reports? And some of them were not very useful. So after a while, he stopped publishing one article, second article, so the paper got to be very, very short. And so they told him, it's going to go out of business. What are you going to do? We can't have a newspaper with no news. It doesn't work. So he thought, and then eventually he came to the idea. He said, I want to publish books that are Christian books about faith. And it was one of the first Christian publishers in that time, very successful, right? Second one, she was a singer. Of course, the environment and the songs and what she said. Afterwards, she said, I can't do this. Even though she was very successful. So she went in the group. She said, what do I do? So the pastor said, don't worry. Just sing in the beginning of the service. And then afterwards, we'll see until, and he helped a little bit. They pitched in. She lost her job. Until they decided, one day they decided, okay, we'll record. She had a very nice voice, very successful, future of the new industry. But in all the people's life, you see how God changed it. It was not, part of it was fiction, but part of it was based on this. This was a movement because how the people's lives were changed by radically deciding to follow what God wanted from them. And it's very hard. Like, it sounds very easy. Everyone says, yeah, they get the bracelets. But I remember when you really decide, it radically changes your life. And even many times the people, like the guy who owned the publisher, his wife's like, are you crazy? Like, the people working for him, all of them were going to leave, but they quit. They said, this is going to tank. Like, everything is going down. Why? Because if they probe him, Jesus would do that. Some people will not accept that. Actually, most people will not accept that. So anyhow, I'll go back and see what the other characters are. But the disciples, that's exactly what they did. They lost everything on one side, and they gained everything on the other. And not everyone understood. Just like the rich young man, he's like, sell everything? He said, are you sure that was the message? And Christ did not leave room for, like, maybe he meant it this way, maybe half, or maybe I can sell later, or what if I postpone? Like, because all the money can go towards the apostles. He said, everything, and then follow me. Not follow me first. He didn't ask the others in that same way, but St. Peter said, well, we left everything. Okay. Overcoming fears, different solutions. I think you mentioned a lot of things. How to go step by step, your financial stability. I want to talk about the last one just a little bit, because I know we're a little bit over. When the Lord said how our focus should be on Him and not on the storm, and this is the lesson of St. Peter when he was walking on the water. Because my favorite part, one of my, is that the fact St. Peter was walking already. So it's not like he got off the boat and then sank. He had the courage, he believed. Christ called him. He said, because if you call me, then I know I can do it. You don't want me to fear. So he started walking. He said, this is good. Like, I accomplished. Like, you have a bucket list. Walk on water. Like, he accomplished what he sought to. But why in the middle of the success that you have failure, which happens often? You have the answer already. I'm asking a question. You know the answer. Because why did he fall down? The time limit was up. He could only walk for a certain. What was his mistake? Yeah. Very close. Huh? Doubt? He had doubt. He was thinking, yes. Yeah, but he was, yes, he did, but he was walking. So, like, I mean, at least, say, imagine, like, Christ is here, and so I'm coming, and maybe you have a good amount of time, success. And then right here, he drops. And so he says, save me, and then, yes. Exactly. What was he looking at? The water. So he was paralyzed because of the storm. He's like, oh, it's a big wave. It's very cold. It's very dark. I'm far from the boat. So he started to think, and what if I fall now? So all of that, which was it realistic fear? Like I would say, if that was the immediate experience, then you would say, yeah, you have a point. I thought I could do it. It didn't work. But if you have the experience, then it makes zero sense. But that's the whole point. Fear doesn't make sense. Fear causes us to panic as a result of a condition that sometimes has already been there for a while and we've already been successful at for a while. And the solution is in front of him already. Like if he knew, he already sees Christ walking on water. The example is in front of him. You know, he has the promise. Like everything that is needed is already right in front of him. So it's like this is the. If you ask St. Peter what is the best day in the service, the best experience, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. If I was St. Peter, I would be like, because it was also special for him. Like all the disciples didn't run out. So something very unique experience for St. Peter, and it also highlights his own weakness, right? So it was his weakness, but it was also his greatest strength. And sometimes, many times, that is how our experiences in life are. The things that make us most afraid or most shameful or most weak are the things that also are behind them our greatest strength, because they are gifts from God. I think he wanted the blessing because he didn't want it. He's impetuous. Like he has a lot of ideas, and many times they're not good ideas. So it's good for him that he's like, if you command me, like if I don't have the, he's acknowledging, I don't have the authority to walk on water. You told us to like let the sick and raise the dead and all that. You never told us walk on water. So he said, I don't have that authority, but since you have the authority, you can share. If you allow it, you can share it. You can share it with me. That's why the disciples always said, let us sit next to you, like one on your left and one on your right. And Christ said, no, this one I can't do. Let me have Holy Virgin Mary on one side, and then the Father. Like even if it was spatial, like it doesn't work. Or else we have the icon, we have Peter, James and John. Although I love Saint. There's an order. So Christ in that time said, no, this doesn't work. But to walk on water, he said, yes. That's why this time I did it different, miracle different than last time. Last time I was on the boat, I said, calm the storm, no problem. But this time I want to show you also that I can give you that same authority. She said, okay, I'll take it. I'm curious why the other disciples didn't like say, okay, can we come too? Like, why not? Just meet in the middle of the ocean. The other thing is a meditation on the cross. We say this in the liturgy of St. Cyril in the silent prayer. And when I was at USC, we're going through the different prayers of St. Cyril. But in the silent prayer of Our Father, after we say Our Father and we're preparing for communion, we go through all the different types of passions and different categories of sin. And so when it comes to fear, this is the whole category, he tells us in one sentence, St. Cyril prayer, how to overcome. So he said, how do we overcome? For the sake of him who suffered in the flesh on our behalf and upheld the victory in the cross. What is he saying? meditation on the cross and on suffering gives us power and victory over fear. Why? Because the Lord was not afraid to be crucified. In fact, when the soldiers came to capture Christ, and he said, "You're Jesus of Nazareth," and so he said, "I am." What happened to the soldiers? They fell back. They couldn't move until what happened? Yeah, he very subtle, because it's not. Sometimes they put it in one of the films like that. They'll do it. He has to give himself over to death. Like when they came to stone him, remember that time in the Gospel of John? He went through the crowds. They didn't find him. Like how? Like how are they going to miss? They didn't see him. It wasn't his time, right? So he has to give himself over to death. He submit because he's not afraid of death, but the time has to be the right time. And so Christ gives us that authority when we meditate on the power that he had over suffering and of death. That's why we say "Tokatigon." That's why we say "HG Bishop Kyrollos" soon, in a couple of weeks. Why? Because he said, on the cross, it displays for us the power, your divine power, not weakness. We know the mystery of the cross. For the rest of the world, they're like, how can this? And sometimes non-Christian, how can that be? Why are you wearing the cross? And for them, he said, how can God be man? And even if he chose to be man, he's not going to come in that form. He said, no, that's what happened. He said, why? It doesn't make any sense. Exactly. To give us the authority to die so that death would die. Give us authority over death. Or what the fathers say, the death of death. Because it has no victory now over. Where is your sting? Yeah. He conquered death and gave all humanity the ability to conquer death. That's when we go around saying Christos Anisti, say he's the victorious one, gave us his victory. So meditating on the cross, because he's not afraid of death, he's not afraid of any of these things. On the opposite, he gives us the victory over them, and the most powerful, which is the power of the cross. That's why when you do the sign of the cross, it is the greatest authority that we have. And we learn from our mothers, grandmothers, even the word of the cross, right? It seems superstitious. But because it has a power. It has a power, even the word of the cross. But hopefully not that we're saying it out of, fear and panic and anxiety. No, but we're saying it out of the power of the cross. Okay. So that's why the Lord is not ashamed to bear the cross, that is our due, and gives us victory before any fear. That's why he said, for God has not given a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound. I don't go too much, but the power is also done collectively, individually, and collectively. So the church is strong, and when it gathers around the cross, also we have victory over fear, and we labor together, we struggle together against all of these fears. That's why sometimes when you are afraid of something or concerned about something, it's not a realized fear, and you check with one of your friends, with the Puna, with your parents, it should be, right? And guided by the Holy Spirit many times. They'll give you one word, 2 words. One time, in the diocese, there was a time when Pope Shenouda was under house arrest, and the churches were kind of in chaos. And the Pope is in the monastery. He's not allowed. They don't know if he's going to be freed. And the president wants to kill the Pope. Very difficult time. Hang him. And actually, he planned to send him to a prison, which nobody knew until later. And so he would just die there and elect another Pope. It's one of the biggest challenges in the church. And many people I know, servants, they just came home and they had the news like crying, sobbing, what's going on? Overnight. And here, even when there was like a committee put in to be in charge of the church at the time by the president, very, very difficult. I'm sure you've heard about this time, chaotic time. So anyhow, one of the priests, when he was praying the liturgy, there were people protesting because he didn't take whatever position. So making so much noise during the liturgy, and he got so frustrated, he's like, I can't pray the liturgy, and it's my own people. So he went home, and he was very distraught, and he couldn't sleep. And he's like, I don't even know what I'm going to do next Sunday. Pretty much. He was like, so he was very close to Pope. Pope Kyrollos appeared to him and said, what's wrong? He said, the people. And what they're doing. He said, don't worry. You're going to pray next Sunday, the most peaceful. He said they will be there, but they won't do anything. So you pray the liturgy. It would be the most peaceful liturgy in your priesthood. And it happened exactly as he said. There was nothing. But I remember the reaction is something little, trifling. So God can give us authority, even though for us it seems so great. It's a big obstacle. God gives us the obstacles not because he wants to torture us, not because we deserve it, or not because he's not powerful enough to prevent it from us, but to help us to experience and give us authority, give us the power, so that we have an experience with him against all of us. And it's no people. That is much more. And then, of course, the spirit of love inspires us with the love towards him and towards neighbor, that when we love one another, for love rises from power and not from fear. So that's why it says perfect love casts out fear. That's why St. Augustine says, I love the Lord, and then I do whatever. If you have perfect love for God, whatever, that means you will not do wrong. For nothing is apt to dissolve love is fear, and that suspicion of treachery, and glory be to him. No questions? Yes. Very good question. So for the first question, we should. So the question was two parts. The first one: how do we have practical way that we can remember the past things when we are challenged by the same things that may repeat? And the second one. And how do we focus on the cross in a daily way? It gives us that practical benefit. So the first one would say journaling is probably the most helpful. And there's different ways to journal. Some people do it more like a diary. But what should be the focus is like the verses and meditations that God gives you in your quiet time. That's one part. The second part, which is those experiences. One year I decided to have, during the Thanksgiving, to focus on Thanksgiving. And I said, if you thank God for something unique every day, 3 unique things every day, 2 to 3. By the end of the year, you'll have 1,000 things to be thankful. But it's not an easy exercise. I thought it would be easy. In the beginning, you get to a couple months in, you have to press yourself for something unique. So it could be something in that day or that period, or something that you've always had but you didn't realize. That's the experience. And the more that we practice, the more that we realize that there is so much to be. It changes your mentality. But especially when you write down those experiences, they definitely repeat. So So when you are troubled, you go back, wait, didn't this happen before? And so if you put it in a search, like, yes, you know the day, you know exactly what happened, and you'll be like, that's right, God guided. And then if you didn't even write, but you have very close people that love you very much, your priest, your family, friends, they will remind you, like, didn't you deal with this already? Or they'll tell you a story. Isn't this the same as what happened with so-and-so and so-and-so? Yeah, but that's completely different. God allowed you to, because it is pertinent. And God surrounds us with that experience already. That's why do you have 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then 7 loaves and some little fishes? I mean, like, and Christ was saying, we just did this. And even the evangelist, it comes like right after each other. Some people thought it was the same, but it's not. That's why they told us the number. So we know that it's at a different day. And then the first time in the boat, Christ in the boat. Second time, he's not. It's the same. Isn't the same experience? Like they should be looking. Well, Christ is not here this time, so I guess we're gonna die this this time. He called you to be the apostles. Like how if you all die, that means there goes the church. Like they didn't think rationally. Like what, he's gonna go find another 12. And they have the story. Well, the first 12. That didn't work. They died in the. It's not going to work. So the experiences that we have and that others have around us, we're for. You know, perfect example. You know, Eutychus, the story of the boy who fell down from the 3rd floor when St. Paul was giving the sermon in Acts chapter 20. House of Jason. So he died. St. Paul was giving a long sermon, like a little, but it was at midnight, so it's not this late. For me, it feels like midnight. We didn't get to sleep yesterday. So he was giving the sermon. He was resting on the window. It fell too much and died. So St. Paul went down. Of course, all the people gathered. He said, "Don't worry, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. He's dead." But do you know why he had to live? Like St. Paul knew he has to rise for a few reasons. Like if you think very logically, this boy has to. First of all, nobody's going to become Christian in this city if he dies. And nobody's going to come and take communion. Nobody's going to want to listen to a sermon. And also St. Paul, like the apostle, the one who's also, the name is like, oh, that's the guy who killed, isn't the little boy that was in the and all the youth will not want to go to the church because they might die. Like all of this, St. Paul realized this is not from God. That fear cannot overcome because the Eucharist gives life, not death. And same for the word of life, it has to bring forth life. So this is an attack. So St. Paul knew this is an opportunity. This is not a punishment. This is not a random act that God like looked one way and then this guy died. That he has no authority over. So he said, no, life is in him and he rose from the dead. Now the people know if we die, we have life. If we stumble, if we are negligent, if we fall asleep even in a spiritual life, or physically, that God will give us life. So that's the first. And then the daily meditation on the cross, we usually say, like usually noon, even or when you start your lunch, so you take, if you can. When you see the clock, you know it's about. So how that we have meditation on the cross, so we have a cross, hopefully, nearby. You have even on your screen. I know people, they'll do the litanies. You can say them in a minute or two of the 6th hour. So that's one way. And then sometimes in the evening, then you take your time. So Abu Shar Cabin, he used to have a very famous cross. I don't know, a picture of Mary at the cross. Did you see this? Mary Magdalene. Oh, you have. Let's. Buna will bring it. This was in front of his where he rests every day. So before he rests, he meditate on Saint Mary Magdalene, who was at the foot of the cross, and he always said, she, with her wisdom, she was the wisest one. Like, you know, when Christ said, that Mary, when Mary chose the good part. Oh, yes. So this is the one that he had, but he was like, I want to be like her. So at the feet of Christ. And when he departed, even one of the servants told me he didn't have, I don't think he had this, or he may have had it with him, but he took a piece of paper and just put a sign of the cross on it and wrote at the bottom, for me, on my behalf. And that was his meditation. And one of his people serving with Abuna told him, pray for so-and-so, he's not in the church, and they didn't have good news about him. So Abuna said, I want to visit him. I'll try to visit him tomorrow. I said, Abuna, it's only just a matter of hours. So he said, no, I will visit him. And then he said the roof opened, like it wasn't there anymore. And so his meditation of the cross led to experience of the heaven. And then after Abuna departed, that youth came to the funeral. So the servant saw him and said, Abuna wanted to come to you. He told me he wanted to come. He said, yes. Yesterday I have a dream, and he came to me in the dream, and I knew I have to repent, so I came to the church. So anyhow, God opened. God opened. Other questions? Yes. Yes. Perfect. Test. Yes, victory. So there's different reasons why we may have obstacles. Sometimes they are directly from God, and sometimes they're from other people, but God will use them for His glory. So always kind of assessing that at first, trying to figure out why. Sometimes we blame God for things that people are doing out of their not good intentions. But what we are sure of, no matter what the reason, that God will use it, as you know in the book of Romans, for His glory. That He will bring it all together for those who love God, and it will be in like whatever He said, they'll say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake, right? Rejoice. So whatever they say, do, act, or whatever challenges I may have, that God uses it for, but in His way. So I don't always know at the time what's going on, but I know after, because that's what it needs, the strong faith to pass through those difficult. And the generations before us, they did an excellent job. Like my concern a little bit now, maybe with all of the technology and with all of the ease of life, that we forget, hopefully we don't forget how to suffer. And that it's good. Like I was even reading an article the other day saying how good it is to experience boredom. Like, so saying that previous generations, it's normal, like they're bored, so creativity comes out of that boredom. But now if youth are not bored, so there's zero, like if there's a challenge or there's a lack of that creativity and that energy, right. That is actually productive, not destructive. So there's a lot of things that we don't want to lose, like I said, when it comes with the challenge, comes with the obstacles. That's where you look at very successful people, they've had a lot of challenges, and God gave them grace over the challenges. And the more they struggle, when they have a lot of struggle, you see also a great success. Yes. sometimes it's a game every time we think we know, and then the devil comes and like confuse us. But we're assured, if we look in the stories, in the scripture, and in the saints, that even when they made large mistakes, what God does, He's just like your navigation, He'll recalculate. So like we made a mess, a big mess. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but He used for His glory when I submitted to Him. So I have that practice that I'm not trying to fix all of my mistakes, even if I wouldn't be able to. Right? I can try to be like Adam and hide the mistake, right? Or ignore the mistake, or look at what mistake bury, like Moses. Bury the, you just killed him. Bury and run away. It didn't work. So that when he tried to even run away, they said, like what you did yesterday. So he didn't have 24 hours. It surfaced, right? It was exposed. But God even used that, because that was the opportunity that, yes, he was able to experience in the desert, and God trained him, raised him, but he didn't realize what was happening. Like 40 years, imagine God was using, 40 years of his life was a preparation for the next 40. But he thought, I'm going in retirement. This is peaceful, the sheep are nice. I'm not going to kill any more Egyptians. No more bad days. It's like very, quiet and peaceful life. And then he said, Christ said, okay, that's enough. Now I need you to go to Pharaoh. He's like, what Pharaoh? I like the sheep. Controlled environment. Go, the 100,000, now's the time. He said, no, I stopped. I gave up on that dream. It was a long time ago. He said, no, back. This is the time. So God even all the weaknesses, like he transformed them into strength. And so when I know that he can do this, then I'm not. Even if you look in the story of the penitent woman, or the woman who was caught in adultery, or even Nathaniel, many of the others, there's a lot of part of their story that's hidden from us if it involves sin. So God doesn't always expose, or they'll say exactly what the sin was, but we don't even know the name. That was intentional to tell us that really, like with forgiveness, God covers a multitude of sins when we repent. And he transformed so that even for the glory, like Saul, we know, he was consenting to his death. He was right there for St. Stephen. Like, couldn't avoid that. And even St. Paul, he didn't hide it from the West. He used it from the rest of the people. He used it on 3 times in the book of Acts to convert people. He said, that one who was trying to who killed St. Stephen and did all this, now I'm the one who was preaching the Lord Christ. That's all you had to say. Or Lazarus, when he was sick, and he died. So when Christ raised him, just for him to say, I'm Lazarus, so people would convert. Because they know his story. Like he didn't even have to do a great accomplishment. Christ did. All he had to do is like walk a little bit. So he had to die and he had to walk. And so that was the mystery. He didn't have to give sermons much, even as a bishop. Very good opportunity. I had to show up. He said, Lazarus. I said, yes, Lazarus, I was dead and now I'm alive. You're in the cave? Yes. What do you remember? It's black. I don't remember anything. It's a stench, like Saint Martha. It smells. And the grave cloth, I remember the grave cloth. I heard him say, Lazarus, come forth. Simple sermon. They said, okay. And even the people who didn't know, he said, he's still alive. He had to live in the cave. God willing, we're going this year. See where. After, they were trying to kill him again. So he rose from the dead. The Jews tried to kill him. And then he escaped to Cyprus. They tried to kill him there. And he hid in the tombs, so nobody's going to go to the tombs, and he's not afraid of the tombs anymore. It's his weakness when he died, but it became his strength. He said, I can live here. Even then, right? So eventually, even as the bishop, but he was a witness for the Lord wherever he is. So it's a good example for all of us. It's coming up this next set, not this Saturday. I'll give the shortest service. We pray. rest. Anything else? Yeah, they're not in. I can tell there's more graduates than there are. But they told me, the college told me that the high school and younger is even more prevalent. She said, no, I have to check this. So he didn't. So in the beginning, I said, okay, maybe I have to beg. I find a bread. In the beginning, they said yes, and then after a while, they're like, you can ask for us for money every day. Even I was a priest. They said, that's not going to work. But what I said, in this environment, what the apostles do, like, he takes care of us. So you have to put your trust in God, and then you find different things happen. So I remember that I minimized trials. So I only had enough that would probably barely get me, until I say, okay, how can I get to the bank? Because even then I had to actually physically go to the bank in order to get the cash, because I couldn't get it in India. They didn't have that bank in Slovakia. They didn't have that type of bank in India. So I had to go to Chicago to get cash. Anyway, so I barely made it, but then I say, okay, how can I manage in the interim? You eat, and then nothing else, like no coffee, nothing. Just do the bare minimum. And what also experience is that when we practice that poverty, even it's a small way, like we took a vow of poverty, so it's every day. But when we desire to be to live poor, God gives you a special joy as well, because you don't want anything, you don't need anything, and you're all the other thoughts and distractions. You're not thinking about, should I get this type of watch? Should I wear this? Should I wear that? No, it doesn't matter. Like you only have it. It's very, very simple. That's what, if you go to serve the very poor people, you find that simple joy. And if you, the opposite, I remember when I came after the first time, and you see the contrast. And we have over and above what they have in those villages, but where's that joy? It's harder to find. It's there. But it's covered by a lot of things. You have it. You're looking weird. Anything else? Great. Stimatania Coneo, Nimerestos Benoti, Evoron Tiherini Moinan and Tikerini Seminan and Tikerini Kananovan, we thought that the government won us money of Mashad. I mean, make us worthy to pray with all thanksgiving, our Father who art in heaven. Now may the love of God, the Father, the grace, only begotten Son of God and Savior Jesus Christ, communion and gift of the Holy Spirit be with you, those who wish to go in peace. Peace of God be with you.